developing games on Roblox is a lawless place with so much freedom to do as you wish in the Roblox Studio game engine, and so much freedom in the way you write your code with a Luau scripting language. It can be hard to find the right and safe and correct mix of your code, where it is and how it works, in order to make your game the best it can be. Now, I've had some experience in these lawless lands, and I've learned some things over the years that can help you in organizing and structuring your projects and your object-oriented code within those projects if you choose to use it. And in this video, I'm going to kind of let you know my opinions on how things should be structured in your code, and some best practices and some style guides with capitalization and naming conventions that you can follow to hopefully make your games more readable, more organized, and just overall better to work with. So while you watch this video, make sure to keep in mind that these are only my opinions. You can disagree with them, and you can, comment your disagreement down below. I'd be interested to see what you think. But subscribe to my channel if you enjoy this video, and like the video as well if you enjoy it. And with that, let's get straight into the action. So let's get started. So in order to organize your scripts or whatever, you first got to figure out where you want to put them. It's a very important question because it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So for example, when I'm working on a standalone model, like when I made those hover cars a long while back, or like the ballista, or stuff like that, I want to put my scripts within the model. So if I'm in the workspace and I have a model of some kind, and I want to ship this model out and either sell it, I guess, if you're doing commissions, or just give it out for free like I do for most of my models, you can just put the scripts within there. And recently, Roblox added a feature which is absolutely wonderful. I love it, where you can go to the script properties and you can change the run context. So you can run a client script even if it's not parented to the character or the starter player scripts or starter character scripts or anything like that, which used to not be possible. Because before, if you wanted stuff to run on the client, it had to be within a tool, within one of these two folders here, starter character scripts or starter player scripts, or within the starter GUI, and only in those select locations. But now we can run client scripts wherever we want, which is pretty cool. So you can do that now, which is really nice. So you're able just to export this model to whatever. But a lot of times people just want to make entire games. And for that, I would only restrict your scripts to server script service and the starter character scripts or starter player scripts, to be honest. Don't even put anything in starter GUI, because ideally you'll be using a library if you're dealing with complex GUIs, and otherwise you can just access your GUIs through the character, just to keep your GUIs alone and your player scripts alone. And so yeah. So after you've answered that question, now it's time to actually make your script and start coding. So I'm just going to create a script in server script service. Let's just say I'm making a game. Now the first thing to think about when you're making your scripts is this concept called you ain't gonna need it, or you aren't gonna need it, which basically means don't try to architect your elaborate complex game scripts all at the same time, trying to guess what's gonna happen, trying to figure out what you're gonna need, what your needs are gonna be in the future, because game development is an organic process. Your ideas are going to change as time goes on, and your scripts are going to reflect that. So you need to incorporate this philosophy of you aren't gonna need it. So only program what you need at the moment, to an extent at least, and then refactor your code. Don't be afraid to refactor your code. And what that means is changing the structure of your code as time goes on. Because when I first started making games, I was afraid of doing that. I always wanted to do it once, make my games perfect, and then just call it a day and leave crappy systems in place. But although refactoring takes a lot of time, it takes a lot less time to refactor than it does to guess, try to formulate all your code from the beginning and just guess it. Because the best way to get better at guessing what your project needs is to make a bunch of projects and go through different trials and figure out what works and what doesn't. So, for example, in one of my earlier games, this was Color Chaos: The Next Generation, I made this tool module, which at the time I thought it was a good idea. You'd have like your general like tool like parent class, and then other stuff would kind of use that, and then it would add functionality to it, which is great and all, I guess. But I added a bunch of like random stuff that like only applied to some tools, but it was like in the main parent class, and it didn't really look too good. And then the worst part is that I put all of the tools and all their stuff in the same script. So this script is like almost 1,000 lines long, which is always a bad idea. That's one other thing. Don't make your scripts this long. I could have easily isolated this into multiple scripts, but I didn't because I was too afraid to refactor. Each week I was like adding a new tool, and I'm like, oh, I just gotta add a new tool. I can't worry about fixing it. But it took me so long to figure out, oh, this is going to be the perfect way to set up my tools. I'm going to do it this way. It's going to be perfect. And it turned out it wasn't. And that's okay. You got to realize it's okay to not get your code structure right the first time. Just be okay to change it. Like I made a video a couple weeks ago on submarine warfare where I refactored almost the entirety of the game. And it's great. Like my code base feels nice and robust, feels solid, and it feels nice to work in. So don't be afraid to refactor your code so it's easier to work with, and it also gives you that impetus when you start out just to go and get your hands dirty, because like fail fast, if you're keeping up with like rockets and rocket science. SpaceX has that idea. They make rockets. They make a lot of rockets a lot quickly, and they wait until it explodes. They see what goes wrong, and then they fix it. That's what you should do with your code. You shouldn't try to do elaborate designs that take a lot of time like NASA did with the Space Launch System, because that thing is never launching. So you need your code to be like a SpaceX rocket. It needs to launch, and it needs to fail fast so you can figure out what's going wrong. So now that you have that high level sort of understanding, you want to pick where your script goes. Then you want to make sure that you're not overcomplicating things before you even get started. Once you get started, you got to remember, keep things simple. So if you only need like a single function, you don't need to make an object-oriented class for that. So if I'm just trying to like make a teleport function that will like take one thing and move it to another thing, I don't need to create an entire teleporter class. Now, when this starts expanding into multiple different situations with saved state between each function, that's when a class is necessary. So let's actually, extend this sort of idea. So you have teleport, which would like teleport like player 1 to player 2. And let's say this is like an object. And so let's say this is initially like a command, right? So you can just leave it like this. And, maybe you can say, like, another local function, like teleport to me, which takes P2. And then we, like, access, like, the current player that can, like, teleport people or something like that. And that would be fine, right? But then, let's say you make this teleporter, like, actually exist in the world. So you need to have a cooldown. You need to have like save state, like where it is, how it can change, whatever. That's when you would get rid of your individual functions and put it into a class. So don't make a class for the sake of making a class, because objects are so freaking cool. Like, don't do that. Make it simple. Functions are great. I love functions. And only make objects when you need to. So let's do that. We got a local teleporter, which will be equal to a new blank table. And then we can set the index meta method to teleporter. And then we can create a couple functions. So we can create a function teleporter.new, and then a function teleporter : destroy. And then ideally, actually, let's do that. We're going to put this in a module script. Because so a very good rule of thumb in terms of keeping your code organized is whenever you have classes, or whenever you have related functions, put them into their own modules and only keep one class to one module. So you don't make the mistake like I did with that tool script that I just showed you a moment ago, where everything's all together. This keeps your total script small, and it keeps your code very organized and very logical, because in a lot of other programming language, it forces you to keep classes to their own scripts, which still isn't that good. Like Java, we don't talk about Java, but sometimes that works well, and in this case it does. So I'm going to rename this to the teleporter. And then this is just basically the way I set up all my object-oriented classes. I'm going to return teleporter. There we go. And we're going to say a local self equals set meta table, a blank table, and then teleporter. And then we're going to do return self. So what I'm doing here is all I'm doing is making a new instance of the class. And this self here is not important. I can change it to a letter A, return A. The only reason I'm using self is because it just makes more sense in context. Just because it's highlighted in red doesn't mean it's a special keyword. Self is only special when it's within a function block with a colon, like here. So just keep that in mind. I do that. It's convention. A lot of people do it, and that's how you do it. So now for another form of convention, when you're saving your fields or your properties of your class, I like to use Pascal case. So you could say self dot cooldown time is equal to like 3 seconds or whatever. And this is just Pascal case. The first letter is capitalized of each word. Some people like to use camel case, but this is just my personal preference. And then as for functions, same thing goes. So you do teleporter cooldown. And I always like to keep my destroy function towards the bottom, just so it's like you start new and then it progresses through your other functions and then it destroys and then that's it. Even though since you're using this in such a way with this table at the beginning, it doesn't matter the order of your functions. So in this cooldown, you could just say like cooldown the TP, whatever. I'm not gonna actually do implementations, that's not important. And you can call that from outside. But let's say you have something like a private variable you don't really want other scripts to access. For a teleporter, I don't know what you could do. You could just say self.is cooling down. This will be equal to false to begin with. And you can see what I did here. I put an underscore, and then I used camel case. And this, again, has no special meaning. It's just a naming convention. What this allows me to do is to tell other scripters or tell myself when I look at my code base a couple of days later, because I'm gonna forget it. It's just gonna happen, that this is not meant to be accessed by outside scripts. And this is a very good, usually for like a game by a single developer, it's not really that important, but for modules that other people need to access, this is very, very important, because people need to know what they should be using and what they shouldn't. Since Lua is very flexible, or Luau, I guess I should say, is very flexible, people can do whatever they want. But we use these conventions to make sure they only do what they should be doing, because, an unhandled object like this can just lead to disaster if people are changing fields and properties when they shouldn't be. And this same convention carries down to a function. If you only want a function that does a specific thing, like function, I don't know, teleporter, just do something. It can be a private function. But what often happens is I find myself doing, and I'm not really sure how to feel about this, is you create an init function or something, and then you can call it from the teleporter new, and you put a laundry list of private functions that just do specific things. And the issue with that, so if you have self do something and then you call self do this and self do that, this just doesn't really make sense. One of the hardest parts of writing code is giving meaningful names to functions and properties. So what's the point of having a bunch of functions like this, where instead of doing this, you can make this init function block just a little bit longer, and you just put comments. So you can say this does something like this, and then that does that, and then finally this does this again, or something like that. So instead of creating a bunch of separate like functions that are private that are only going to get called once and in a init block, I would split it up into a bunch of different commented blocks within one big init function. Don't get scared or afraid when a function becomes like pretty large. You only need to split up something into a function if it's used more than once, really. And sometimes with something like this init, it's better to like keep it out of the new, because making a new, this is all just personal preference at this point. Since Luau is so flexible, you can really do what you want, but just don't try to like mimic other paradigms, other forms of code just because it's like the convention for other languages. Like I initially did that, function split up thing because I have a lot of experience in Java, and Luau is not Java. You don't need to split up stuff into a bunch of different functions because that's the industry standard in the Java world. You can keep everything in your init function, although it may be a little bit longer. Who cares? Like, that doesn't matter. I guess in a select case, if your indentation is getting out of hand, that might be cause to move it into a separate function. But if you're only using that functionality once, there is no point to split it up. So that's just what I would recommend. But like other than that, when you're writing your code, make sure to do something that is intuitive and readable and that you like enjoy looking at. So when you're commenting your code, make sure you don't like say what the code does. Just like say why you're doing something. Make like long blocks that just kind of like explain your reasoning. Don't just kind of like write comments to write comments. If you don't need to comment your code because you're working on a code base by yourself and your code is self-explanatory, that's fine. Don't let other people like ridicule you for not doing good code practice, because ideally in a perfect world you wouldn't need to write comments because your code would just basically explain itself, which obviously is never going to happen, so you need to write comments. But yeah. But at the end of the day, the most important part of organizing your projects is to release a game. And that's something that I often lose sight of. It's not about writing perfect code. It's not about perfecting every single bit of your code base so it's readable, it's safe, and it's correct. It's just about making a game that more or less works properly and that players enjoy. So if you spend so much time trying to make your code perfect, you're never going to release your game. You obviously want to release your game. And that's something I struggle with a lot. And so you just got to remember, just get it done. Even if it's not perfect, you just got to get it done, because finishing a project is so much more important than making the project perfect, because a perfect project is something that no one is ever going to use or play, because nothing can ever be perfect, so it will never get done. So with that, organizing a project is hard, and people realize that, so there's been efforts to make this process easier. That's why there are frameworks that help you. Like, for example, a really popular one in my community and in a lot of Roblox communities is Knit. And Knit is great because it's simple, it's easy. It does have a couple of downsides that the creator has even mentioned, the fact that it's like singletons, that everything is accessing one like module or service in the higher level or controller. That's kind of bad. But it does help you organize your project. And there are other efforts going on like Matter ECS, or the Entity Component System, where entity component systems have been tried and true in game development. Everyone loves them. Unity uses them. A lot of people love Unity. There's a lot of different stuff that uses them, and I recommend checking that out too. It's pretty early in progress, but stuff like that can help you organize your game structure without you making all the decisions. Because the thing about Luau is it's very, very powerful. It allows you to make a lot of your own decisions, but those decisions can lead to analysis paralysis because you may not know which ways to do something. So at the end of the day, just do something that you like, and if there's other things to help you achieve your goals, achieve your targets of what you're trying to do, just use them. Don't feel like you're plagiarizing. Don't feel like, because like it's open. It's meant for you to use. So just basically what I'm trying to say is just find the simplest way to make your game. Don't try to overcomplicate things. Trust me, I've been overcomplicating things my entire development career. And although it's nice food for thought, like, it doesn't make you any more productive or efficient. And like, you need to get your games out. So that's what I recommend doing. But other than that, that's about it for this video. I will have a lot of links in the description to reference different things. And there was one really good video on about like why object-oriented programming is bad by like this dude. I don't advocate for everything in it, but you can definitely check it out. It's just interesting food for thought. And I hope you take this video and just use it to, enhance your development. Just use it kind of as a baseline. But this is all my opinion. So if you don't like it, just yell at me, tell me why you don't like it. Maybe you'll change my mind. We'll see. But this is just what I've gained from a lot of experience. And that's the most important thing, experience. Like, get things done, start writing code. That's all I say. And comment if you have any questions or suggestions or any opinions. And I hope you have a nice day. And goodbye.